cost of the latest investigation into deaths at Gosport War Memorial Hospital has risen to £13 million. Relatives say it would have been quicker and cheaper to have held a full public inquiry into claims that elderly patients were given fatal overdoses in the late 80s and 90s. Well, they're also questioning the independence of the panel led by James Jones, a former Bishop of Liverpool. And our East Hampshire and Isle of Wight reporter Dom Blake has more on this. He joins us live from Portsmouth now. So, Dom, who have you been speaking to then?
Good morning, Lou. Well, I've been speaking to the relatives of a lady called Elsie Devine. Now, she was an 88-year-old from Titchfield near Fareham. And back in 1999, she was admitted to the hospital in Gosport suffering from confusion and kidney problems. And there was no record of her being in pain, but she was given powerful pain-killing and tranquilizing drugs. And her notes show that at one moment she'd been sitting up chatting happily, but within a few hours of that comment being made, she was completely unresponsive and never recovered. And an inquest later found that the drugs she'd been given were inappropriate and that they had contributed to Elsie's death. Here's her granddaughter, Bridget Reeves.
What happened to my grandmother that morning that she woke up, completely dosed up on morphine, completely high, administered more drugs, morphine, midazolam, clopramazine. That to me is the most appalling way in which anybody can end their life.
And now Elsie's family are concerned about the latest inquiry.
Yes, her death's one of many that are being investigated by a panel led by James Jones. Now, he's a former Bishop of Liverpool, perhaps best known for leading the Hillsborough inquiry, and his panel was due to report this year, but that's actually now been put off till 2018, so there was a delay which people were unhappy about, and we've now learned that the Department of Health's budget for all of this latest inquiry has now gone up to £13 million, and that's come as a shock to the Reeves family, who've always wanted a public inquiry, always called for a public inquiry, and say now that that almost certainly would have been quicker and cheaper.
And questions being asked about the independence of the new panel.
Yes, this is another issue that concerns them, and one of the main concerns about the panel is the inclusion of a man called Dr. Bill Kirkup. Now, he worked with the Bishop on the Hillsborough inquiry. He's a lead investigator for the Parliamentary Health and Standards Ombudsman. He's chaired other serious inquiries, including an investigation into neonatal deaths at Morecambe Bay Hospital. So it could be argued, actually, that he's uniquely qualified. But the Reeves family see him as more of an establishment figure, and they say that mainly because he was Associate Chief Medical Officer from 2005 to 2009, and at that time the Department of Health was still sitting on a damning report about mortality rates at Gosport War Memorial Hospital, which had been commissioned way back in 2002. So the family have their doubts, and they say that now the government really needs to do more to ensure independence. They say that having failed in their legal duty to prevent Elsie's death in the first place, they're now failing to provide a truly independent investigation.
It is the duty of the state to investigate those deaths independently, which isn't happening in this inquiry. Aside from being independent, it also has to involve the members of the family or the victims. And as you know, this inquiry is not a public inquiry. It's not what we've requested. It's behind closed doors. And really, the only involvement that we have is to sit in these meetings where we have limited time to speak and very little correspondence or involvement.
So, Don, what does the Gosport panel have to say?
Well, we contacted the Department of Health and they told me they'd spoken to Bishop James and that he told them that panel members had all signed a declaration when they started saying that they hadn't undertaken any work in relation to the Gosport War Memorial Hospital. They say those declarations will be made public when the panel's work's completed, and in the meantime Bishop James is satisfied with Dr. Kirkup's declaration. He also believes that his work on other investigations demonstrates his independence, that Dr. Kirkup was chosen because of his experience, and that Bishop James says that he takes the issue of independence very seriously, the panel isn't biased, and that all panel members are vetted carefully.
And the family say they're also being hampered in their own investigation.
Yes, you may remember a whole series of inquests were held into this back in 2009, and the Reeves family have now asked Hampshire's coroner, Andrew Bradley, for written transcripts of those proceedings, but they were told they would all have to be typed up from tape recordings and that it will cost them a small fortune. Here's Elsie's daughter, Anne Reeves.
He wants £3,000 deposit, and when they've finished producing the transcripts, it'll probably be £6,000, and we pay the full amount to him then before he will release them.
So faced with that £6,000 bill, the family made further inquiries and were very surprised to discover that actually the tapes had already been transcribed by lawyers acting for the General Medical Council, and actually lots of other organisations had them. So the GMC had some, the Department of Health had some, even government ministers had a copy. So we've contacted the General Medical Council. It now says that it does intend to let the family have the transcripts on a voluntary basis, but it has to go through this huge document page by page to remove everything that might possibly breach the Data Protection Act. So the family could still be waiting some time, I'm afraid, Lou.
Dom, thank you very much indeed. That's Sarah. East Hampshire and Isle of Wight reporter Dominic Blake. And in the next hour, we're going to be talking to Bridget Reeves, the granddaughter of Elsie Devine, who you heard a little bit from earlier. That's coming up after 8 o'clock.